Salve, salve, Dirty Birds! E aí, fã de NFL? E aí, torcedor do Atlanta Falcons? Bem-vindo a mais um Falcons Play Action. Esse aqui muito especial. Eu tô aqui com o Scott Kennedy, que é um cara absurdo na análise técnica do jogo. Ele foi scout durante muito tempo, trabalha com isso, e ele vai falar um pouquinho pra gente aqui sobre a classe do draft dos Falcons como um todo, os prospectos e tudo mais. So, hi Scott, welcome to Falcons Play Action. Really appreciate you accepting the invite. And before we get started, please introduce a little bit about yourself, your resume, and everything, your history with the football. And thank you for accepting the invite once again.
No, I appreciate you having me on. And I speak enough football that I understood about every third word in Portuguese. so thank you. Prospects, working. I get that stuff. I get it. Again, my name's Scott Kennedy. You can find me on Twitter at Scout Kennedy if you wanted to follow me.
Follow at Scott Kennedy. Kennedy.
I worked for a company called Scout.com for 15 or so years, and I was director of scouting and did some NFL draft. I did a lot of high school to college and then did some college to NFL just because I knew all the high school kids that were coming out. So I did that for a long time, and now I run Falcons podcast, Falcons site. I grew up in Atlanta. My parents moved me to Atlanta when I was 5. So before we were talking, I think I moved here in 78. So from like 78 to 1997, I think the Falcons had 3 winning seasons in 20 years. It was rough. It was tough to be a Falcons fan. But I grew up in Atlanta, fan of all the local teams, and really enjoying what Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot were starting to build after having their hands cuffed for so many years because of the poor management of Thomas Dimitroff in the previous regime, how they finished that team.
Yeah, I am really excited about this regime as well. And so let's get started with the most controversial pick, in my opinion. Here in Brazil, the Falcons community had a long discussion for several weeks before the draft. I am a Team Bijan. I was always on favor. I know you weren't such a fan of the pick. You explained a little bit in our podcast why. But please give us your input. Why do you think this is a good pick? How the board was for the Falcons over there, how it fell for the Falcons and everything?
I try and think like a general manager would think, and a general manager is thinking for the next 10 years, not necessarily for the next year. Now, if I'm thinking about my job and I'm a coach and I want to win games next year, you'd be hard-pressed to have made a better pick than Bijan Robinson. But when you're thinking about draft picks and the advantage that you're supposed to get in the draft by being a bad team and they reward you for losing, you're a football fan, so you understand relegation and all that. But in the NFL, they reward you for losing. Part of that reward is you're supposed to get the best players at a cheaper cost on your contracts against the salary cap. And that doesn't happen if you take a running back in the top 10. Bijan will be one of the top 10 highest paid running backs in the NFL, whereas a first-round pick at wide receiver would have been the 40th or 50th pick. The longevity of a running back is maybe 4 or 5 years. You typically, if you sign them to a second contract, you regret it. So you're talking about instead of taking a positional player that maybe you have 10 to 12 years if you hit, you're looking to get maybe 4 to 5 years out of Bijan Robinson before he's worn out. Think of the Falcons. At one point, who did they sign to a second contract? At one point, Devontae Freeman was the highest paid running back in the NFL when they signed him to a second contract. That was a bad idea. Yeah. That was a bad move. He was really good through his first contract, but then a second contract. But if I'm looking at a player that can have the most impact in the NFL next season, Bijan Robinson can be that guy. And this team needs to win some games. They're 7 what are they, 4 or 5 years in a row without a winning season? They need to win some games, and this is a good piece to the offense. Don't get me wrong. This doesn't have anything to do about Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson can play. He can play. This is more about the long term, and frankly, the Falcons probably should be thinking about the short term because the long term has been poor.
But with how the board fell, Tyrell Wilson was gone, Will Anderson was gone, Paris Johnson was gone. In your personal opinion, if you were the GM, would you make that pick? Would you go with Gonzalez, Skoronski?
I probably would have gone Jalen Carter first.
Even with the off the field questions?
I think so. I think it would have been worth it. And that's the question you have. Is this roster in, if you pull up Atlanta Falcons, and I always just type in REF for reference, and I pull up the Pro Football Reference of the Falcons, you start looking through every first-round pick that they've had over their history, it's bleak. It's ugly. Now, it's gotten better through the last 10 years, but you go back a long ways, there are a lot of busts in there. This team really can't afford a bust. So I understand they're not good enough. They don't have enough depth where if they miss on their 8, that really hurts them.
Yeah.
Eagles, not so much. The Eagles will be fine with or without Jalen Carter next year, or probably the next 3-4 years. But if you hit on Jalen Carter and get as good a prospect as he is, you've got one of the 3 or 4 best interior defensive linemen in the NFL for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
That was worth the risk for me, assuming what you knew wasn't too bad. But I don't know all that stuff.
That's my point.
Yeah, I don't know all that. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think Christian Gonzalez would have been a pretty safe pick. I'm happy with Bergeron, as far as in the second round. I wouldn't really want it. I would have understood the Skoronski pick. There wasn't any way that they could have gone where I would have really been upset. Like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Bijan Robinson was polarizing because people take one side or the other and they never meet in the middle. I understand the Bijan Robinson pick. It wasn't my first choice, but I can certainly explain it.
Yeah, sure. Bijan wasn't my first choice either. I was my preferred player would be Gonzalez. I really like him, really, really. The off-field questions for Carter, to me, it's a little bit of red flag. And Skoronski wouldn't be a sexy pick, let's say that way. And we got a Skoronski type of guy with Bergeron, and we can go with him right now. What do you think about him? I haven't really watched him before. I watched it on Sunday and today morning, and I really like it. I think he's a guy with a perfect scheme fit with the Falcons, and as a guard, I believe his potential will be maximized in this Arthur Smith offense.
Yeah, and he could probably he was supposed to be a really good run blocking tackle.
Yeah,
who then can move inside and play guard because when you move guys, you move them closer to the ball if they're not cutting it. So it's like, okay, he might be okay at tackle, but he could be a really good guard. Let's move him closer to the ball. Now your offensive line looks really good. You got Jake Matthews. You got Matthew Bergeron at left guard. He is a plug-and-play starter, and it scared me to death that some of the Falcons people were talking about Dalton Reisner from the Denver Broncos. No, thank you. No, thank you. He's a good run-blocking guard. No, he's not. Him and Lloyd Cushenberry were getting killed in the middle of the Denver Broncos offense. No, I don't want any of the guys that the Falcons lined up last year. I'd rather have than Dalton Reisner at left guard. Now you got a long-term answer.
And another thing that you said, I believe you said in a podcast, the Falcons needed to get cheaper on the offensive line. So we had veteran contracts for Lindstrom right now, McGarry, Jake Matthews. So we have Drew Dahlman and Bergeron right now on rookie contracts. So that balance a little bit. And for you guys who doesn't know, Scott does also a Broncos podcast with his co-host, Nick Kendall, at Mile High Hurdle. I believe it's
Mile High Huddle, yep.
Yeah. So go follow Nick as well because it's a really good content. And for the third round, the final pick of day 2, Zach Harrison from Ohio State. We said about Skoronski getting the second round. This Skoronski, we got the Tyree Wilson of third round of a little bit of a project. 0 pass rush moves, as I saw, really, really raw. I was a little bit disappointed. I thought he would be a little bit better in that, but he came with a good
third
round. Yeah.
Third round. And what's interesting is you went with D'Angelo Malone last year in the third round as an edge. Now, this is an edge and an edge. They couldn't be more different in players. D'Angelo Malone was a quick, undersized type of pass rusher. Zach Harrison could be a monster, and that's the thing. I don't mind taking that swing. Tyree Wilson, any of those guys that you would have taken at 8 had some red flags.
Yeah.
Tyree Wilson he didn't have a ton of production, little late off the ball, foot injury. Peter Skoronski, do I really want to guard at 8, for God's sakes?
Yeah.
Christian Gonzalez has been okay, but he's not Sauce Gardner. There's no wide receivers you want to take there. We've already talked Jalen Carter and the character issues. There were always questions at 8. 8 was kind of a scary pick, so they went safe. All right. Well, in the third round, Zach Harrison is a height, weight, speed plus player. He hasn't put it all together yet. Can he do it in the NFL? If you can, you've got one of the more physically gifted edges that you have. Now, you've got a bunch of bodies at edge with the Atlanta Falcons. Lorenzo Carter, Zach Harrison, Ogundeji, Kenneddy, Bud Dupree. I'm forgetting somebody too.
Lorenzo Carter.
I think I said Lorenzo Carter, but that's who I forgot this morning.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting somebody too. So there's like 6 guys at edge now, but you don't really have the guy. You know, Kenneddy flashed last year. Lorenzo Carter was okay. Bud Dupree isn't a come in and take over type of guy. He'll be a depth piece. Zach Harrison has a chance. You know, if he comes in and learns from some guys and they scheme him up and he's able to harness, as far as the 2 most physically gifted players at edge right now on the Atlanta Falcons, Lorenzo Carter and Zach Harrison. Lorenzo didn't put it all together either. And he probably never will. He's had several years to try and do it. But Zach Harrison will be now the most physically gifted and really the only one with some weight, some junk in the trunk at 270 pounds that can help set an edge and play more of a true defensive end.
Yeah, and also you have Calais Campbell, you have David Onyemata, you have Grady Jarrett to help develop him in the field and off the field on the training. You have Ryan Nielsen, who everyone from the Saints fans to the entire NFL said that his greatest trait was to develop these big edges with Cameron Jordan. He tried that with Davenport, and now they drafted Isaiah Foskey, who is a really similar prospect. So the Saints are continuing with this mentality of developing these young guys in the defensive line. So I thought it was a good project to let's say to gamble. If you're going to take a chance on an edge, let's be a freak one with great length and wing size and wingspan and everything. So I really like the pick for, as you said, it's a 3rd round, so it's a little bit of a project.
Yeah, and by that point, it's like you might have been able to go in a different direction, but I think that was it's a risk reward. I think it was a good risk. Yeah. It was low risk because it's 3rd round, and the reward could be really, really high on him.
Yeah. And in the beginning of day 3, we got I believe the greatest value from all the analysts that they are saying everything with Clark Phillips III from Utah, the cornerback. A little bit undersized, not so athletic, with a RS for you that don't know what is a relative athletic score to measurable. The physicality of the athlete with his size, weight, speed, and all this kind of traits that the NFL requires. But everyone said he was an exceptional player, really smart, was All-American unanimous, I believe. So I think it's a good value.
Everything we just said about Zach Harrison, flip it.
Yeah.
Everything. Because he's not all that big. He's not all that fast. He doesn't have all the physical godlike gifts of a guy like Zach Harrison, who is 6'5", 275 pounds and looks like an Adonis. He's short. He's slow, relatively speaking. Let's be serious here.
Yeah. For NFL level.
Yeah, for the most, one of the most athletic positions in all of sports, an NFL cornerback. He's still going to outrun anybody in the Premier League, maybe short of Adama Traore. That's about it. But he understands the game, let me see who's somebody, if for football fans out there, let me compare him to someone like, a Cesc Fabregas would be a player like that, or a Jorginho, these guys that are slow. You can't believe, how are you out there? You're so slow. Well, they read the game that they're 2 steps ahead of everybody else before anybody else ever gets started.
Yeah.
Clark Phillips is a player like that. He's Pac-12 player of the year, where they throw the ball all the time, and he was an All-American. So 4th round, slips a little bit because he's not a height, weight, speed guy, but the dude is a football player. And, maybe he comes in, play some nickel, play some dime, 5th and 6th defensive back on the field, and he helps some of the other guys too. If he's coming in, it's crazy it sounds, he's probably 3 years younger than Richie Grant, safety, 3rd-year safety, but he may help Richie Grant anticipate and see things a little bit faster too. Yeah. So again, risk reward. You went with the upside guy in the 3rd round, and you got your football player in the 4th round.
Yeah, and as you said, he can help Richie Grant because Richie is much more physical player than a smart one. So they can complement each other very well, in my opinion. And in the 7th round, I really thought they would go with wide receiver for depth. For me, it's a clear necessity for the team right now. Bryce Ford Wheaton from West Virginia was there, and I really wanted him because of his athletic traits and everything. But they went back-to-back picks in the 7th round with DeMarco Hellams from Alabama, free safety, and Jovan Gwynn, South Carolina offensive guard. I saw that Gwynn is a little bit undersized, so maybe he will become a center. He will be a reserve for sure. And Hellams will be the fourth safety on the depth chart.
Yeah, when we're talking safety, you see him fall this far, and you're like, "What? Wait a minute. Okay, well, he must have been thinking. Well, he led Alabama in tackles last year.
Yeah,
which is Alabama is one of the 2 premier programs in college football right now.
Yeah.
So the guy can play the game, but again, he's not a height, weight, speed guy either. A little bit, they say he's a little bit stiff, but if you end up getting a really good special teams player on here, the Falcons were really good at special teams last year. This is one of the places they've really improved. They've lost a couple of guys that were special teams players. They brought in some special teams players in free agency. This could be another one of those picks, a physical safety, good tackler, not so great in coverage. That's okay. Let's see what they can do with them. And then Jovan Gwynn, I think you're right, could be a center. The knock on him is shorter arms. Okay. Well, if I don't have the length to get out wide with guys trying to go around me, then I'm going to go into center where I got a guard on this side and a guard on each side of me to help protect me a little bit. And let me see. I don't remember his numbers coming out. Is he South Carolina?
Yeah, he's South Carolina.
He was 6'2", 297. That's center size. 32-inch arms, 5'1", in the 40, and 4'8" in the shuttle. So okay, not spectacular. Yeah. But that's why you go to the 7th round. So that's why you go in the 7th round. But it makes me wonder, what are they going to do with Matt Hennessy, who was a backup center and backup left guard last year, and then this is a guy who's a backup center, or because I think Dahlman's got where's he competing? Both guard spots or center? Is Hennessy full-time guard now? So it'll be interesting to see where they line up as they go 1s and 2s during OTAs and preseason camps and stuff.
Yeah. Do you think that Jalen Mayfield time is over in Atlanta with this move?
I don't know. They worked such wonders last year with that offensive line that I'm not willing to write anybody off, no matter how bad they looked. I was ready to ship Caleb McGarry out, with the Tide.
Yeah,
just leave him out. I don't care. No more. I wanted a right tackle last year in the draft. The draft before that, I'm like, this guy, and I was banging the drum to re-sign him. And so watching what they've been able to do with the scheme and the trust that they've been able to build. Jalen Mayfield came into the league. I think he just turned 21 or was 20 when he came in.
Yeah, he was really young.
He had 14 starts in college. Period. And he played 16 in the NFL his first year at a position he'd never played. So last year was what we call kind of a redshirt year. You call that in college, a redshirt year where it doesn't count towards your eligibility.
Yeah.
It's not really like that. You still get paid.
Yeah.
But he didn't play. So a year of maturity, a year of soul searching, a year of technical training and learning the game. Maybe. I'm not counting on it, and I don't think the Falcons are either. That's why we saw Matthew Bergeron get drafted high in the 2nd.
Yeah.
But Mayfield, maybe. It wouldn't surprise me to see him on the field. It wouldn't surprise me to see him get cut, just based on the track record of what they've been able to do. My leaning would be, okay, this guy can't play. He's going to be gone. But like I said, all the reasons why, I don't necessarily blame him for looking so poor his rookie year. He wasn't ready. Wasn't even close to being ready. That was a failure by the Atlanta Falcons organization. And
they threw him into the wolves. He threw him into the wolves, as you
absolutely
said in your podcast.
That was a failure of them to not have the resources to upgrade that position based on previous failures from previous regimes.
Yeah. So I believe that's it. Just to wrap it up, your overall analysis of this draft class. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, Victor, it was nice to be able to go into the draft knowing that this wasn't the only method of making the team better.
Yeah.
They had already spent a ton of free agency money on the defense. They had shored up some of the special team players on offense. They had taken care of their 2 pending, Chris Lindstrom coming on a deal. They had already wrapped him up, and Caleb McGarry. taking care of business on that. You got Onyemata, you got Okuda for a trade, Jonnu Smith on a trade at tight end, that you could really just focus on getting the best player you could that could help you right away. And I think they did with Bijan. Matthew Bergeron's a day one starter at left guard, I believe. And then we'll see. Clark Phillips can help you one way or another, whether it's special teams, nickel or dime, he'll help you. And then if you can get 90% of the potential out of Zach Harrison, you really got something though. So I've said, you've been watching us for a year, Victor. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
That sit tight, wait for 2023, and it will be fun again. It will be fun. You've earned it, Falcons fans. It's been tough these last couple of years while you've had to take your medicine on the salary cap stuff.
Yeah.
But Terry Fontenot has done a good job of bringing players and convincing them to come to Atlanta, including a player like Calais Campbell, who could have gone pretty much anywhere he wanted to.
Yeah, he chose Atlanta. So it was a really nice offseason, the most exciting one for me, for sure. And Scott, once again, I really appreciate the acceptation of the invite. I really think for the community of the Brazil fans, not only Falcons fans, but the draft community here in Brazil is massive. We have a lot of analysts that do a lot of work with more than 250 prospects over a year. We have on the clock that is our reference over here in Brazil. So again, really appreciate you accepting the invite. And let's see if we can meet again. If the
absolutely,
the season...
you need to come be on my show, and if you need anybody else to talk, some Chelsea or Champions League or something with an American accent, I can do that. I can do that too.
Yeah.
So this is where my fandom is. My fandom's in football. My profession's in the NFL.
Yeah, sure. So thanks once again. I will just wrap it up here in Portuguese. Então, pessoal, obrigado você que nos acompanhou. Eu espero que vocês tenham gostado do episódio. O Scott é um cara que entende muito de NFL, muito de futebol americano, então considerem bastante a opinião dele, porque ele sabe muito. E é isso. A gente nos vê na próxima live. Vamos ter uma live fazendo o recap do draft no geral, de todas as escolhas, com o Jones, com o Rick e o Thiagão. Mas é isso. Nos vemos no próximo episódio. Um abraço e até mais.